Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 8 of Divergent Dialogues. So today we're going to be talking further about emotions, so ADHD and autistic folks' experience of emotions and trying to find some balance. So I wanted to start off with some research that I found. So there's been research conducted by Pulsar et al., and it found that autistic children have less differentiated bodily experiences of emotion compared to non-autistic children. Specifically, autistic participants showed more similarity in emotions across different body parts. This suggests that autistic children have a less differentiated bodily experience of emotion compared to their non-autistic peers. The study also revealed that non-autistic children showed reduced bodily emotion differentiation with age, a pattern not seen in autistic children. So I thought that this was really interesting research because, as we talked about in the last episode, a lot of autistic folks can experience challenges with like interoception and also alexithymia. So it made a lot of sense to me because it's like, well, if autistic people are struggling to differentiate and label their emotions, it sounds like it's because in their body, a lot of emotions kind of feel the same or similar. So I thought that that was a really great explanation. And I think it'd be really cool if they did some research on adults to see if that kind of held up and had that similar experience. Because much like what we're saying in the last episode, like I think it's like that, those nuances of emotion, they're hard to pick up on and label and verbalize.
Yeah, because like I mean, if you think of like your own sort of experience of like anxiety and excitement, for example, like the bodily sensations that are associated with both of those can be really, really similar. Really excited, like your heart races a little bit because there's like anticipation maybe, and that's a key feature in anxiety, that racing heart, and the tightening in your stomach. That again, that's a key feature in stress and anxiety, but it can also be in that sense of excitement and anticipation for something that you're really wanting or really excited about. So it makes sense that it can get really confusing, and all of a sudden Christmas is a horrible thing because I have all these sensations that feel like anxiety, stress, and like just distress.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's like there can be challenges around discerning, I guess, physical health issues that we should be concerned about versus like emotions or sensations in our body that are informing us, giving us a message that we're having particular emotions. And then we do have emotions, it's hard to decipher between which emotions as well. So it's like, okay, that's why this is really tricky.
Because we talk about things like the racing heart, that's racing thoughts, and it usually is associated with anxiousness. So if I'm feeling these things and, like this, starting a new job or before Christmas or before a holiday, for example, it must be that I'm having a negative response to this thing that I should be looking forward to and excited about.
Yeah. I was going to say, and if you're an ADHDer, like everything is just racing all the time. So it's probably even harder to figure out what's going on. But yeah, it's really interesting though. Like I think back on my life now, and there's probably so many times where I've actually been excited about something and I thought I was anxious because I think, yeah, you're right. Like for me, excitement and like anxiety has a similar kind of feeling in my body. So just think there's all those times where I had the opportunity to experience that positive emotion, but I was so worried thinking, oh my gosh, I'm anxious. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a mix. Like if you're starting a new job, like I think it's completely reasonable to be like, 50% excited and 50% anxious. But yeah, I think it's, again, when we're focusing on those, I don't like to say negative because I don't think any emotions are negative because they're all necessary, they're all information, and they're all valid. But I guess anxiety is probably one of those emotions that people would like to experience less. So yeah, I wish that I had have known more about my emotions and how my body expresses them, so that I could enjoy that excitement for what it was.
Yeah. And yeah, and I agree with what you said, that I don't like to label any emotions as negative either, because you're right, they are all information. And I think that that would have been helpful somewhere along the line to understand what these like labeled negative emotions are actually trying to tell us. You know, I often say to my kids about anxiousness and nervousness, it's like, no, it's okay. That's your body telling you how much you care about this thing you're about to do.
Yeah.
You know, if you weren't feeling anything, then, you know, yeah, how do you know how much you care?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or like if someone's feeling really angry about something, I think there's this sort of connotation that, oh, if I'm angry, then that kind of makes me a bad person. Shouldn't be feeling angry. And it's like, well, no, like again, like you're like, for example, it could be you're angry that something unfair has happened, or like that's information to go, hey, yeah, that's not fair. And it's like, it's okay to feel angry. Like if we didn't feel angry, we just wouldn't care about things necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's important information. And I think it's often when we don't sit into that emotion and try and understand it, when we push it away, that's when it can become an issue. Or if we're, I guess, acting on that emotion in a way that's harming ourselves or others, that's when it can become an issue. But the emotion in itself is okay. It's totally fine to have to feel angry. Everyone feels angry sometimes.
Well, yeah, you're right. I think anger is a real interesting one a real interesting emotion to unpack, because society has done a fantastic job at convincing us that anger is bad and it's not okay. Especially for women. You know, women aren't allowed to experience anger. We're not allowed to show any sort of feelings of aggression, because it's just, you know, like that's not what good girls do. But
Yeah.
equally so, we've society's done a great job of sort of telling us that anger isn't an emotion, because men aren't emotional. They just get angry. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting, because, you know, anger is an emotion, but men aren't emotional, women are. Like, right, okay.
Put
So
it that way. That's a really good point.
yeah, 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 society just, yeah, put a lot of effort into convincing us that anger isn't actually an emotion at all. It's that's what men feel.
Yeah. I often talk about that with my clients. Like, I find that often when men are sad, it presents as anger. And
Yeah,
when women are sad, it presents as, that teariness and that, that typical kind of, sad response.
yeah,
And so, yeah, often I'll have men come in and go, oh, I have an anger problem. And I'm like, okay. And then we'll have a few sessions. I'm like, no, actually, I think you're really depressed, or I think you're grieving, or whatever it is. And then it's like, I have to convince them to go there to those feelings, because they're so
yeah.
used to feeling angry, because that's what's socially acceptable. So it's really interesting how society can have such an impact on our emotions and how we express it.
Yep. And which ones we express, because yeah, like socially speaking, it's just more socially acceptable for men to be angry. And it's more socially acceptable for women to be teary or show that more I guess expected expression of sadness around, yeah, being teary and things like that. So yeah, but if men aren't allowed to show sadness that way, but it's okay to demonstrate anger, then they're always going to skip over the actual emotion and get straight to anger, because it's the only thing that socially they're allowed to put out to demonstrate any kind of emotion.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I was also just thinking, we're going on a bit of a side quest here, but we will come back. But um, like this isn't a hard and fast rule, and obviously everyone has a different experience, but I tend to find that when it comes to meltdowns, women tend to go to that more shutdown than that outward expression of a meltdown.
Yeah.
Whereas like boys, well, boys, men tend to have that more outward kind of expression of that. And like a lot of girls tend to internalize things. And again, like obviously everyone's different, they have their experience, but yeah, I guess that kind of feeds into that expression of, I think a lot of girls when they're younger, they probably did have that more outward expression, and then that was really squashed down and said, oh, you can't do that, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I think with boys, although, generally there is concerns when, particularly when it's quite like outwardly aggressive behavior, there's concerns, but I do think it's more kind of accepted when they're having that response.
Well, it's this stuff that has a lot to answer for as to why women are so underdiagnosed in the autism and ADHD space, because we are socially conditioned to internalize any feelings of aggression or anger or any, like any urge to display that. So we do internalize it, and quite often it presents as like just complete shutdown or self-directed aggression. And then that leads to a whole bunch of other different diagnoses because it's self-directed harm and things like that. But yeah, it's at the moment, the conversation is about how women present differently in autism and ADHD, suggesting that we just naturally internalize things. But I think that there is a lot to be explored around, well, is it just that we naturally present this way, or is it really strong social conditioning?
Yeah, are we shaped to express or not express those emotions? Yeah, really interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's really important to consider all these things, and it just highlights the importance of having these misconceptions about autistic and ADHDers and how they feel and express and interpret emotions. It can have such a detrimental impact on mental health and well-being. And like if people are going into that research space with those misconceptions, it really calls to question the the outcomes of that research, how it's been analyzed and processed, and their kind of perspective. And often when it comes to clinical work, we're drawing from the research, and like lucky for us, we have our lived experience. But obviously we've been to uni, we've had our training, and we always try and seek out like neurodivergent affirming stuff, but that's only been in like the last few years where a lot of that's been available and people have been out there providing that kind of training. But it's just like, when society's saying something, the research is saying something, and then you're getting trained, and then you're getting into that therapy space. Like I think a lot of people, a lot of therapists and a lot of health professionals get a really bad rap on how they support autistic ADHDers. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, a lot of them just haven't had access to a lot of this information, and that's what they've been told. So they've just gone, okay, well, some university lecturers told me this, so it must be true. And I think without that lived experience, it probably is really hard for people to understand, like, for example, that, my way of processing emotions is my brain will just play a song on repeat in my brain until I Google the lyrics. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I said that to someone, they'd be like, what? But for me, it makes sense. So, I think we don't want to be vilifying people. I think we really want to be sharing this information and sharing these messages and sharing these lived experiences so that they can integrate that new information into their understanding of autistic folks and ADHDers.
Yeah, I completely agree. Without that without that really broad understanding and, from each person's own words of how they do experience things, and I guess supporting people to to an extent unpack how'd you get to where you are with your emotional, like your understanding of your emotions. Like we can't fully understand this space without hearing from others and what their experience is, because otherwise it's just an assumption that is based on the neurotypical understanding of emotional experience and expression.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
So Teena, you wanted to share some information about how to cope with emotional flooding?
Yeah, so emotional flooding, like I touched on in the last episode, it's it's the whole concept that we do experience our emotions in a really big way, and sometimes it comes on like really, really quickly. It can be difficult to manage that influx of emotion, and sometimes it does sort of present like hyperactivity or just general sort of craziness, like excitement and all over the place. And I guess the misconception is out there that as like ADHDers who do have these big expressions, that our feelings, our emotions are not valid because they're just us being impulsive. And equally so on the other end, when we're having really big expressions or experiencing emotions of the more challenging nature in a really big way, we're often suggested that we're overreacting. Now, like I strongly believe that it's only a problem when you, the person experiencing the emotions, decide it's a problem. Is it getting in the way of life? Is it getting in the way of what you want to do or relationships that you want to have? And if the answer is yeah, it is, I kind of want to sort of balance things out a little bit. There are different things that you can do to help manage that. And you've heard me talk about mindfulness lots.
Yes.
It's
Just
my
a little
thing.
bit.
And it really has its place here when we talk about different strategies to help regulate our emotions. Mindfulness is a real go-to. And it has been studied in the ADHD space as well. So there is that evidence base to support using it for this very reason. And part of it is about learning what those different emotions feel like in your body, so you can recognize that that is actually what's happening. Some people will use the intensity of their emotion to judge whether or not, like, oh yes, I'm feeling so excited about buying this new car. My emotions around it are like they're at a 20 of intensity, so that must mean it's the right thing to do. Or I'm not feeling any sort of intense emotion around this thing, so it must mean that I'm not interested. But if you can, and that's not necessarily true, like there's a whole bunch of external outer world things that will contribute to how intensely you experience something. So learning what those different emotions feel like in your body, but also learning what are the contributing factors, like from your outer world, that will influence the intensity that you experience different emotions. And then you can apply that to various scenarios to help you regulate. And it's not about not experiencing like the intense emotions ever again. It's about you choosing when you want to sort of reduce the intensity a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, at least I can speak for myself, when it comes to alexithymia, I've found mindfulness to be really helpful, particularly completing like body scans. That really helps me to get into my body, touch in with myself in my body, and also it gives me this space to be able to listen to parts of my brain that usually I probably don't. Like when I'm in that space, I often do get a deeper understanding of where I'm at and how I'm feeling, and that kind of thing. And sometimes those emotions do come up in that space, because when you're often just in here all the time, you do have to give your body space to be able to talk to you in a way. And
Yeah.
that means you have to kind of get out of your head into your body, and kind of experience that. And I think for a lot of people, maybe that's part of why they don't like mindfulness, because you are touching in on those emotions, and sometimes that feels really uncomfortable. But we need to give our emotions time and space to be able to inform us of what's going on. Because if we just push it aside, usually that's when we're having like health issues and like chronic stress and all these sorts of things. And yeah, I think like sometimes working with like a therapist to be able to as we we're talking in the last episode, be able to find your labels for your emotions and ways of being able to express those, whatever that looks like, and also being able to increase some of that interoceptive awareness as well.
Yeah, I think it's it can be so helpful to have a safe space, like a therapeutic space, to be able to unpack that stuff and really explore it, because you can do a lot of that work on your own to a degree, but then you're missing that piece of the puzzle where, like I was saying in the last episode, where you like that other person can see things and reflect back what they're seeing without that filter that you have. So there is a lot of value in finding that safe space to explore what's going on, and I guess find meaning that resonates for you.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything else that you want to talk about, or can we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it for me. Like you said, we could probably talk about this for hours and go down a million different rabbit holes, but yeah.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Yeah, so thank you to everyone for listening to episode 8 of Divergent Dialogues. If you've really enjoyed our episode, please like, share, and again, if there's any cool research that you know of, let us know. And if you would like to listen more to our podcast, you can check out our previous episodes. So yeah, thank you everyone.